Wendy Dell was 12 years old, and her small brothers John and Michael were 10 and 6. When the boy came in through the nursery window of their tall London house one warm spring night, looking at first for his own shadow. Their father was a warm, serious man who worked long hours at a bank. Their mother was a warm, laughing woman who put the children to bed each night with a small, careful ritual, a story, a small song, a kiss on the forehead. The family kept a large brown dog whose name was Nana, and who acted as the children's nurse in every way that mattered, sleeping across the door of the nursery each night to guard them. It was a small, ordinary, happy family, in every respect that the neighbors could see. But Mrs. Dell had noticed, in the weeks before the boy came, that Wendy sometimes spoke in her sleep about a place with pirates and fairies, and a small, quiet island in the middle of a sea that appeared on no map. She had listened at Wendy's bedside one night, and had heard her small daughter say clearly, in a warm, careful voice, "Second star to the right and straight on till morning." She had not known what to make of it. She had not told her husband. She had quietly begun to check the nursery window before locking it each night. On the night in question, she had forgotten. The boy who came in was perhaps 11 years old, though it was difficult to tell. He wore small green clothes made of leaves and had bright unruly hair and eyes so full of certain quiet things that Wendy, who woke and sat up in her bed to see him, felt at once frightened and warm. His name, he said, was Peter. He had come, he said, looking for his shadow, which he had left behind in the nursery some weeks earlier and which, he had discovered on returning that night, had been rolled up neatly and put in a drawer by Mrs. Dell. Wendy took the shadow out of the drawer. She said gently that she thought it needed to be sewn back on, and that she would do it for him if he would sit still. She sewed the shadow to Peter's small foot with a small, careful needle from her mother's sewing box. He danced around the nursery when she was done, pleased in the small, proud way of a boy who has been given back something he thought was lost forever. He said warmly that Wendy was the cleverest girl he had ever met. Wendy asked him where he came from. He said he came from a place he called Neverland, which was, he said, exactly where all the children who did not want to grow up eventually went, and where he had lived for as long as he could remember. He asked her casually whether she and her small brothers would like to come home with him for a visit. He could teach them to fly, he said. He offered to teach them right there. He sprinkled them with a small handful of pale golden dust from the small fairy he had brought with him, a small, quick thing named Tink, whose light filled the nursery like a tiny lantern. He told them to think of one warm thing, one happy thing, one small thing that made their hearts lift. And Wendy, John, and Michael thought of the small, warm things they knew, and their feet lifted gently off the nursery floor. Peter took them by their hands and led them, laughing, out of the window and up into the London sky. He pointed. "Second star to the right," he said, "and straight on till morning." Neverland was more beautiful than any of them had known a place could be. There were small warm coves and small dark caves and small green meadows, and a small sleeping mountain that rose out of the middle of a small blue sea. There were, as Peter had said, small fairies and small mermaids. And there were, as they discovered on the second morning, small tribes of children who had, like Peter, run away or been forgotten in London and had been carried here on the same wind that had brought Wendy and her brothers. There were also, on the small sea that lay beside the island, pirates. Their captain was a tall, thin man with a small iron hook in place of his right hand, which Peter, some years earlier, had cut off in a fight, and had thrown into the mouth of a large crocodile that had, ever since, followed the captain everywhere he went in the small blue sea, waiting for the rest of him. The crocodile had swallowed, along with the hand, a small clock that ticked inside it, and the captain lived in a small, quiet fear of the ticking, which he heard sometimes in his dreams and sometimes on the small wind at night. The captain's name was Hook, and he hated Peter more than he hated anything in the world. Wendy became, in her first week on the island, a small mother to the small band of lost children who lived in the underground home Peter had built beneath the roots of a large old tree. She cooked their small meals. She sang to them at bedtime. She mended their small clothes. She told them stories about her own family in London until the small boys began to remember, dimly, families of their own. Peter did not join in this remembering. Peter did not remember families. Peter did not want to. Tink the small fairy grew jealous of Wendy. Fairies, being small, can hold only one feeling at a time, and Tink held her jealousy for many days without letting it go. She whispered one afternoon to one of the smallest of the lost boys that Wendy was a large bird flying in from the sea, and that she should be brought down with an arrow. The boy, believing her, did as she said. The arrow struck Wendy in the chest. She fell. She would have died, but she had, sewn into the small pocket of her blouse, an acorn that Peter had given her as a small gift on her second day. The acorn had caught the arrow and had turned it aside from her small, warm heart. She woke an hour later with a sore chest and a great warm relief around her. Tink, who understood what she had almost done, wept small light tears in the corner of the underground house, and Wendy, who had a large, forgiving heart, took the small fairy in her hand and told her, gently, that everything was well. Hook, meanwhile, had learned from a small spy that Wendy and her brothers were staying with Peter. He plotted patiently, and finally, one afternoon when Peter was away, he captured the whole small band and carried them onto his ship, planning to make them walk the plank the following morning. Peter came for them at dawn. He crept aboard the ship quietly. He fought Hook on the small deck as the sun came up over the small blue sea. And Hook, in the small last moment of the fight, stepped backwards over the rail and fell into the water below, where the large crocodile had been waiting for him patiently for many years. The ship was theirs. Peter piloted it back to the small underground home. The children cheered. And Wendy, who had held her small brothers close through all of the danger, sat down at last on the small deck and understood quietly that it was time to go home. Her small brothers understood the same thing. So did most of the lost boys who had over the weeks begun to remember mothers of their own. Peter alone did not understand. He asked her in a small hurt voice to stay. He offered her the island, the sea, the tree, the small fairies, all of it. Wendy shook her head. She said gently that she loved him, but that she had begun to want to grow up, and that Neverland was not a place where growing up was allowed. Peter would not come with her. He said he would rather stay a boy forever in the small, warm shape of his own island than become one of the tired gray men he had seen from the windows of London houses. Wendy did not argue. She kissed him on his warm forehead. She promised she would leave the nursery window unlocked and that he could visit any time. She and her brothers, and all but two of the lost boys, flew back to London that same night. They came in through the nursery window at just past midnight. Their mother, who had refused for weeks to close it or to give up hope, was sitting in the small chair beside their beds when they arrived, and when she looked up and saw them, she wept, warmly, in the small, breathless way of mothers who have been given their children back. The lost boys were adopted over the following weeks into the Dell family and the families of some of the Dell's neighbors. They grew up. They became bankers and small solicitors and warm, ordinary men. Wendy grew up, too. She married a warm, serious young man not unlike her own father. She had a small daughter of her own, a girl she named Jane. Peter came back once, when Wendy was a grown woman of perhaps 30. He flew in through the nursery window one warm spring night, exactly as he had years before, and found not the small Wendy he remembered, but a warm, older Wendy sitting on the floor beside her small daughter's bed. He looked at her for a long moment. He did not understand. She understood and did not try to explain. But her small daughter, Jane, who was 6 and full of the small, warm, curious energy Wendy had once had, sat up in her bed and looked at Peter. He looked back at her. Wendy, quietly, without saying anything, gave a small, warm nod. And that spring night, Peter took Jane out through the nursery window and up into the London sky and second star to the right and straight on till morning. He has come back for other daughters since. He will come back, Wendy always said, for as long as small children believe in warm, impossible things. He will come back, and each of those children will grow up. And each of them, one day, will be a warm mother sitting on the floor beside a small bed of her own, and will look up when Peter